2 is a lot of Notion
That
Thieves.
is a lot of Notion Thief. We'll see if that ends up happening here, though. That said, we are underway game 3 here. Soorani on the play will start with Thoughtseize. Sees Jace, Counterbalance, and 2 copies of Vendilion Click. And
Shaheen, I believe with Umezawa's Jitte in hand. Was not sure if that was going to be kept in this matchup. Looks like it is.
if Shaheen has a card like Lingering Souls in his hand, I can't imagine he'll care much about these Vendilion Clicks.
No, that's, I mean, this is one of Vendilion Click's worst matchups, is against the card Lingering Souls.
And Shaheen will go ahead and take the lock piece. That's going to be Counterbalance. And pretty happy he did, as Dan, a pretty decent top deck for the Miracles deck, turn 1, drawing his copy of Sensei's Divining Top.
And this is about the worst thing for Shaheen to see, because this game's going to go on for a very long time. And much like the Sultai matchup we had against Miracles earlier, the Sultai deck has a lot of good control cards in it. Thoughtseizes, card drawing, all that kind of stuff. If you can keep the Miracles deck off of having Sensei's Divining Top, you can really leverage those resources. When they have Divining Top, their draw quality and the efficiency with their Miracles go up so much that a lot of the cards' impact gets blunted.
And that's really what happened here. Shaheen did have a Thoughtseize, which meant he was going to keep Dan off Divining Top until Dan top decked one. It just happened to be on the first turn.
Yeah.
And Shaheen's side is going to go ahead and crack another fetch land here on the second turn after brainstorming. Perhaps another discard spell. And it is going to be a second Thoughtseize. He knows the hand. He'll take Jace, leaving Dan with just Vendilion Clicks. If Shaheen does have that Lingering Souls, this is going to be a pretty powerful start for him.
Yeah, it's not a bad opening, but the Divining Top is just really bad news.
Damage has been done. Dan with a draw for a turn, which is a land. And for Shaheen, it is going to be just that. Turn 3, Lingering Souls. Dan with no defense right away. Now, he still will probably play one of these Vendilion Clicks, which he'll want to do on his own turn. Shaheen, I believe, does have a Jace, which if he gets to untap, he can cast and protect with these 1/1s.
Yeah. Now, Dan is looking at a Spell Pierce and a Force of Will on this Divining Top activation, so less of a pressing need to answer the Lingering Souls right now, because that Planeswalker follow-up you mentioned, Dan can fend off, but this is still going to be a lot of pressure for one card.
He could draw a card off. Well, his last land's a fetch land, so trying to get a Spell Pierce for that Lingering Souls has become more difficult for him.
Yeah, he would have to put the top on top and then shuffle it away, which I don't think he wants to do. Dan's just going to have to play through the Lingering Souls. It's bad. He most likely has to find a sweeper, but I don't think he can afford to shuffle away his top there.
Another island by Dan. He'll pass, and he's going to go ahead and not Vendilion Click right now. See Shaheen, he's going to continue his tap-out game plan. This is what you've really come to expect out of Soorani.
This is what he does.
Jace will be Spell Pierced. And that's having that Spell Pierce, that's really just showing off the power that this Sensei's Divining Top is giving Dan.
Yep. Now, there's still, I mean, this Lingering Souls is still hugely problematic for Dan, but if he can answer that, I think he has an edge going forward, as his tools are just a little bit leaner, a little bit easier to leverage, particularly with this Divining Top in play.
I mean, that really is the plan, is just to trade cards and then slowly draw better.
Yep.
Thanks to Divining Top. You see, he's gotten the trading down now. He's still taking damage off these 2/1/1s. And the cards in his hand are not doing him any favors. Fetches there, and instead wants to reset the top of his deck. He did have a Swords to Plowshares on top, deciding against keeping that.
Yeah. 1/4 of a Lingering Souls is not going to cut it here.
So what is he looking for then? Is it Terminus here eventually, or
Entreat is also a pretty reasonable response here. He's a bit away from it in terms of mana, but Terminus is not bad if he can get Shaheen to flash back the Lingering Souls and take care of the whole thing. Or Entreat will do a lot of work.
Shaheen's going to go for another Jace. See Vendilion Click, Snapcaster Mage in Dan's hand. Dan may have to just, Snapcaster back that Spell Pierce. That's what he'll do.
These are all great trades for Dan. It just goes to show you how powerful Lingering Souls is in the matchup, that it's not clear to me that
he's not out of the woods.
No.
Yeah, I would think so too. You see those souls swing in. Again, Dan down to 16. Now, the Snapcaster Mage may force Shaheen to flash back the Lingering Souls because Dan actually can the race isn't fast enough anymore.
Yeah, I was a little surprised to see Shaheen leave back the second the second token there. I understand that, you know, Shaheen's behind on the damage race. He's taking these Thoughtseize points, but I feel like he's got to be the beatdown in this matchup. I don't think he wants to go long, and I think he's better served just planning on flashing back the Lingering Souls and trying to race. You're worried about Dan killing you with a Snapcaster Mage over 6 turns? That just doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
You're going to see a main phase Intuition for Shaheen. Now, this may actually be the bait spell. The remainder of his hand, he does have a Dig Through Time in it.
Well, this Intuition also allows him to get something like Lingering Souls and 2 copies of Cabal Therapy. He can get some really potent packages here.
You see it's going to be Red Blasted by Dan, and now a Vendilion Click will come down, and you see Jace number 3 and Dig Through Time for Shaheen. Bunch of haymakers, but Dan continuing to be able to trade with Shaheen's spells just thanks to that Divining Top.
Yeah, both of these cards are really impactful. Remember that Shaheen has the opportunity to protect this Jace, especially with the flashback Lingering Souls in the graveyard. And Dan decides to just take care of the Jace.
Yeah, did have to put the top on top of his deck to get the Red Blast. You see he's going to go for it again. Gets it back online. Dan will leave Vendilion Click at home for right now. Fetch land for Shaheen. His Jace taken away, does still have a Dig Through Time left in his hand. Have to think he's going to go for that.
Yeah.
Can Dan's top continue to find him answers? Or will Shaheen finally get to resolve when he spells? If you think about Shaheen's last plays, they have been Jace, Jace, Intuition, and now Dig Through Time. Shaheen is just, this is a very Shaheen style thing to do. He's just going to continue to smash large threats into Dan, hoping that one of them can stick.
Yep.
Dan, wait for Shaheen to exile 6.
And he's still got the Lingering Souls left in the graveyard too. So if he doesn't find anything too impactful to do right now, he always has the opportunity to do that.
Dan spins the top, and there's a copy of Counterspell.
And I believe this is worth fighting over.
And 5 straight haymakers from Shaheen. 4 straight haymakers from Shaheen, and 4 straight counter spells from Dan. But this one's going to work because Shaheen's remaining card was Spell Pierce, and Dan did not have enough to pay.
Perfect. I mean, the Spell Pierce here was starting to get worse.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering if he'd get that any value off that.
And he has the mana left over to flashback the Lingering Souls or follow up with some other play. So this is just a great turn for Shaheen.
Shaheen really going through most of his big cards, though. Look at cards like Jace, Dig Through Time, and Intuition. He's used all of them now. I think he has 1 Jace left in his deck.
Well, his deck's not light on power. Jace would be nice, of course, but he's still got Stoneforge Mystic. He's still got, Cabal Therapy, more copies of Lingering Souls. He's got Snapcaster Mage. He's got stuff to do.
Yeah. Or rather, no, he actually does play 2 copies of Dig Through Time, so he actually can find another one. But you're right. It is. I mean, Shaheen style. It does a lot of good tap out threats. You see now he does finally flash back the second half of that Lingering Souls.
Yep.
And Dan's gonna have to start trading. He actually just blocks with Vendilion Click to trade it away with one of the 1/1s. Redraws his copy of Sensei Divining Top. Is gonna go back to work, trying to make his cards trade.
It's not a very nuanced approach to the matchup. Here's a thing, here's a thing, here's a thing. But it's been a pretty good plan so far for Shaheen.
Well, and it was very close. Were it not for the Spell Pierce, Dan would have succeeded in, answering all the things. You see Vendilion Click shows Umezawa's Jite and Ponder.
And this might be a spot where Dan says, I need to kind of sweep up your board anyway. You can keep the Jite, because next turn Dan's likely to block with the Vendilion Click regardless. And then what's the Jite doing? It's more damage. I get that. It looks like Dan does want to fight over it, but I think there's an argument for just letting that one go.
Dan replays Divining Top. I suppose with Dan at 16, Jite does speed up the clock a lot, which if all Dan cares right now is buying time, taking the Jite, while not does give a lot of time.
Yeah, it's just the Ponder gives him a lot of looks. I'm not really a fan of giving him a clean draw there, and the way the game is shaping up, it does shorten the clock a little bit on Shaheen's side, but at that point, Dan's drawing even to Swords to Plowshares, for example.
All right, and Shaheen, though, with a great draw of Snapcaster Mage, he's going to push the advantage a lot more. Snapping back this dig through time.
Yeah, I think I would have just tried to play through the Jitte in that spot and put the Ponder on the bottom.
Yeah, I think I agree. Either way, it's going to be very hard to play through this second dig through time. See, Shaheen has kept Spell Pierce, Ponder, maybe just Ponder.
Lingering Souls, Batterskull amongst the cards,
Yeah.
just more. Here's more stuff.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, he even does have Spell Pierce in hand. Gonna shuffle off the Ponder. Just creating card advantage here, as is Shaheen's style. Draw his Polluted Delta. He'll pass. Dan will spin his spin top. Now Dan's one saving grace here, and I think actually why Shaheen may be getting cards like Spell Pierce off of Dig Through Time is that he may be down on cards, but all's forgiven if he just miracles and entreat the Angels.
For sure, yeah. It does not take that much for Dan to pull back into this game. Terminus and the board's at parity, and Dan's the one with the Divining Top, and Entreat, suddenly Dan's winning.
So you think that's why Shaheen would keep a card like Spell Pierce, is to really stop any a reasonable sized Entreat from doing anything?
Jace the Mind Sculptor is also dangerous on this board.
Stoneforge Mystic joins the party here on Shaheen's side. Has another copy of Lingering Souls in hand. Yeah, just continuing to add to the board.
This is another argument here for not taking the Umezawa's Jitte with the Vendalion Click, is it makes the Stoneforge Mystics in Shaheen's deck so much more powerful.
Right, as you see, Shaheen goes ahead and just finds the Umezawa's Jitte again. Shaheen likely only has 2 pieces of equipment in his deck. Once they're both in his hand, his Stoneforges don't do too much.
Yep.
And Shaheen will go on the attack. Just Snapcaster and 1 Spirit Token. He does have to be careful because despite being ahead on the board, he actually is behind on life points.
And he has to respect the possibility of Entreat coming out of nowhere and killing him too.
Dan's gonna spin top. He finds an Engineered Explosives.
Explosives is great here. You know, if Shaheen commits the Jitte to the table at some point here, Explosives for 2 takes care of the Jitte, the Snapcaster Mage, and the Stoneforge Mystic.
Just another one of Dan's tools that he uses to trade. And we'll see. Vendalion Click, what's it going to jump in front of? If he's really on that Engineer Explosives plan, he could jump in front of Spirit, but it'll jump in front of Snapcaster Mage.
I think it's too big of a giveaway that that's the card. And if he goes ahead and blocks the Snapcaster Mage, excuse me, the token there and leaves the Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah, it certainly sets off all sorts of alarm bells. On Shaheen's side, it's going to be Snapcaster Mage for Ponder. Dig through time there was flashback, so it wasn't that. Went with the Ponder.
So now Dan hoping to just bait a lot out and hope the Explosives catches up.
Well, he's going to get some more value out of it here. Before combat, it's going to be Stoneforge Mystic activating to put Jitte into play. He'll get equipped onto a Spirit Token. And here come attacks. It's for 4 damage. Dan will go to 11, so Shaheen has tied it up on life points. 2 counters go onto the Jitte. This will set up that Engineered Explosives for 2. But even then, Shaheen gets to keep some of his 1/1s. Dan's not out of the woods. And a draw for Dan. Didn't even need a spin top. That was Engineered Explosives. It's what he's been setting up for. And here we go. Engineered Explosives is on 2. Shaheen might just Spell Pierce here just to eat some of Dan's mana. He'll go ahead and Brainstorm, actually.
Yeah, Shaheen may be willing to fight over this with something much bigger than the Spell Pierce. This may be Force of Will worthy from Shaheen's spot. Because no, this isn't a sweeper, but it's a lot of turns for Dan. He's able to clean up this board.
And it'll resolve. 2 copies on the explosives. And he'll just blow it up right away. So Stoneforge, Snapcaster, and Umazao's GT all hit the graveyard. See, Shaheen, do not believe, use the counters on the GT.
Yeah, maybe he gained life and maybe just didn't because
Yeah,
it's unlikely for the game to be about that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay, yeah, he did gain 4, so he's up to 14. Now untaps, he swings back. Dan is down to 8. Shaheen will follow up with another Stoneforge. That'll get the last equipment from his deck. It's going to be Batterskull. He'll pass back to Dan. Dan looks at the top 3, and he finds one of the cards he's looking for. It's a copy of Dig Through Time.
Dig Through Time is a big one here. Dan's whole game plan is, if he's going to be able to win this game, it's overpower Shaheen by eventually getting to something like Entreat, and Dig is a great addition for that sort of game plan here.
So here is Dig Through Time from Dan. Delves 6 cards for it. Does it resolve? You see Shaheen. Yeah, it'll let it resolve. He has drawn one of his copies of Notion Thief as well. And Spell Pierce. He may just have to fight over the card that Dan gets. A lot of options available. Jace, Terminus, Brainstorm, another top and 3 lands. Just looking at Jace and Terminus. And that's what Dan will take. He'll crack a fetch land, go down to 7. Dan is getting low on life points here.
And you see a little bit over a minute left on the clock here. Yeah. But Shaheen in a position to probably win inside of time. His deck is attacking for quite a bit here, and Batterskull's on the way.
I think that's why we're seeing Dan get pretty aggressive here. Goes for Jace, but Shaheen's at the ready with Spell Pierce. Now he casts Vendilion Click. That will show Terminus and Snapcaster Mage in Dan's hand, as well as adding a 6th point of power to the table for Shaheen. It's not lethal, but it sure is close.
Well, if Shaheen's able to draw a land here, he can put the Batterskull into play, move it to one of his eligible attackers, and win the game.
And we'll see if he does that. Does draw the untapped land. Stoneforge puts Batterskull into play. Batterskull moves over to a flyer. That's going to equip and swing. Just you said, Shaheen Soorani, 20 seconds remaining in the round. He takes down Dan Musser and moves to 6-1.
It's a slogfest, and the best card in the matchup is Sensei's Divine Top, which is in Dan's deck but not in Shaheen's. But Lingering Souls and just a lot of meat was able to win the game there and the match for Shaheen.
Lingering